Bitcoin is digital currency and computer software. Capital B Bitcoin is the shared code that creates a global payment network using computers connected to the internet. Bitcoins are virtual currency, digital money created, stored, and exchanged on that network. But unlike virtual dollars created by a banker, this new currency was created with math by an anonymous inventor. Bitcoin is an open-source software protocol, like much of the code supporting the internet and email. Open source means anyone, everyone, can use the protocol. No one person or company can control it. Every change to the software is public, open, and transparent. The code was first developed by Satoshi. Then there were dozens, now hundreds, of programmers constantly collaborating to improve Bitcoin's features and security. So what makes Bitcoin a breakthrough? It tackles an ancient human dilemma and solves a computer science problem. Any shared information or data can be flawed, corrupted. Anything can be faked. How do we know that what we're receiving can be trusted?
In our traditional mindset, it's very important to know who is behind this currency because their reputation is significant in knowing that our funds and the true wealth is actually safe.
In finance, we rely on trusted third parties like banks, credit card companies, remittance services. They keep track of money as it moves from one account to another, and they charge us handsomely for it. We trust that their digital ledgers of credits and debits balance. A financial system that cuts out these middlemen could be faster, cheaper, and more secure. But Bitcoin is digital. Music and movies are easily pirated, copied, stolen. How can a digital currency retain value if anyone can make 1 million copies? The answer is at the core of Satoshi's invention. A Bitcoin is not a file on a computer. It's an entry in the publicly distributed database called the blockchain. Just as the Medici kept a ledger of credits and debits, today's banks record each transaction as a plus and minus in their ledgers. Now we call them databases. Bank accounts are replaced by a digital wallet that you alone control. Bitcoin's ledger is the blockchain, a record of every Bitcoin in existence and every Bitcoin transaction ever made. It always balances because no Bitcoin ever leaves it. When a Bitcoin is sent from one digital wallet to another, what they are really sending is control over that part of the database. Code that is a unique key for the new owner. As the network processes transactions, it constantly synchronizes the one ledger across the global network. Each computer or Bitcoin miner has a complete and identical copy. And because the blockchain is public, it cannot be controlled by any one person or computer. Owners of the Bitcoin mining computers are rewarded with new Bitcoins for processing transactions and keeping the network secure. In other words, the Bitcoin network replaces banks and bankers. Today, the combined computing power of this global network is greater than the 500 biggest supercomputers combined, times 10,000. And because every transaction is verified and recorded by the network, a Bitcoin cannot be forged. Digital currency cannot be debased with cheap metals or printed by the billion at will. Too much currency can unleash a monster, skyrocketing prices, trillion-dollar bills that can't buy a loaf of bread.
There's a big movement in the U.S. demanding that the Fed be audited so we can find out what they're doing. Nobody really knows how many dollars are in existence, for example. Ben Bernanke created several trillions of dollars over the last several years, but nobody really knows where they landed.
At any time, for any reason, the central banks can print as much money as they want. They call it fancy things like quantitative easing. And when they do that, it makes the dollars or euros or yen that you and I have worth less. So if the world starts using Bitcoin as their currency, it can't be controlled by central bankers or politicians.
Remember, central banks create money to boost the economy and try to pull it back out before inflation heats up. But no one knows how much magic money global banks are creating to boost their profits with questionable loans.
Bitcoin is completely the opposite. It's totally transparent. You know exactly how many exist.
The computer code behind Bitcoin has a built-in brake pedal, cutting the creation of Bitcoins in half every 4 years. This ensures a transparent, controlled scarcity, and ultimately limits the total number of Bitcoins to 21 million. No lobbyist, no politician, no banker can create more, or change the mathematical rules dictating their creation.
Advancing accountability. And that's one of the things I think is most exciting about Bitcoin and the technology behind it, is not so much that it will supplant the dollar or that it will supplant government itself, but that all of a sudden there's a competitor to government, and that government itself now needs to look over its shoulder more than it did.
This new digital currency can be purchased online with a credit card or in person with cash. And it has the 5 key characteristics of money. But is it a store of value? Is it stable, or will it diminish over time, like a commodity rendered useless, or a crop that fails? The ultimate power of a cryptocurrency is unleashed by mainstream adoption and an ever-growing volume of transactions.
With Bitcoin, the currency has been created much more slowly than other currencies. And the effect of that has been to turn it into what is essentially a speculative asset. If you ask a lot of Bitcoin enthusiasts whether they're spending the currency, they're not. They're sitting on it and waiting for the price to go up. It isn't a currency if you don't use it to pay people. The point is, the average person is quite happy to walk into a bar and hand over, a $5 note in order to get a drink. So you've got to realize that most people are happy with the money system they have.
If most people are happy with cash, they're in love with plastic. In the US, 2/3 of in-person sales are done with debit or credit cards. That plastic is a 60-year-old technology, created by a middleman, never designed for the internet. Each transaction requires personal data, like your name and address. Credit card databases are regularly hacked, with fraudulent purchases charged to your account. Criminals buy and sell stolen credit cards by the thousands in dark corners of the internet. In some parts of London, 1/3 of all online credit card transactions are fraudulent. Card issuers don't hold you responsible for fraud, but protection comes with a price. 2 to 4% in fees. That's $50 billion a year.
The issue with credit cards from a merchant's perspective is there's a lot of risk. If they take a credit card, there might be a chargeback, there might be fraudulent purchases. In fact, there's hundreds of billions of dollars every year in fraudulent purchases.
A Bitcoin purchase is done for pennies, but there are no protections. If you lose your passwords or are fooled into paying the wrong person, you can never get your money back. It is like digital cash. For a seller, this means no chargeback risks. For an e-commerce company like Expedia or Overstock, cutting credit card fees can double their profit margin.
You could not miss the point more effectively than by thinking of Bitcoin as a currency and payment network that will make shopping easier for the first world. Bitcoin is about everything else, everywhere else.
There are 2.5 billion people without a bank account. With Bitcoin, a mobile phone with an internet connection is now a bank with access to the global marketplace.
What happens when Bitcoin services and infrastructure and Bitcoin wallets and payment processors start going into these countries? These people will be able to gain benefits from trade where they could not previously. These people will be able to send money home, international remittance, which is one of the major pain points of the current financial system.
Yeah, if I send $100, with banks it's going to cost me 20%, Western Union is going to cost 10%, other options that are competing with Western Union is still going to be about 5%. And if you are sending to really remote areas, it's going to be anywhere between 15 and 30%.
So in terms of money remittances, it's going to be a game changer using Bitcoin. You do not need a bank account. You just need internet connection and a wallet to get set up. It's a tool to give people an access into the global ecosystem and give them a promise for an economic future, and specifically provide a way for them to not be dependent on a government that could shut down their bank accounts or even could go into their bank accounts and take out finances.
Goldman Sachs came out with a report and they basically looked at if you were to replace all transactions globally, so FX, bank-to-bank transactions, with the Bitcoin protocol, and still charging 1%, mind you, it would save the global economy $200 billion, so not million, $200 billion a year in saved transaction costs, which ultimately goes back into the hands of the consumer.
An international wire transfer can take up to 4 days. Yet the internet allows us to instantly and globally share text, pictures, videos, anything digital. Why not money? Money, which we now know only exists as digits in a bank's database.
Wouldn't it be great if you could send Bitcoin transactions just simply via a tweet? For example, you would say at the end of money, $1 worth of Bitcoin. And so we built just that. All you have to do is hashtag it with Tippercoin, press send, and our Twitter bot will process the transactions, notify you, and give you a link. And this will allow you to either withdraw your Bitcoins or send it to someone else.
With Bitcoin, you can send $1 or $1 million worth of value anywhere in the world. You can do it for free, or you pay the Bitcoin network fee, which is still just around a penny. And there's nothing that the big banks or politicians can do to stop it.
A cryptocurrency that can only be created and transferred with computer networks may be the next step of the digital revolution. The rise of machines, self-driving cars, drones, robots that rely less and less on humans.
What I often think is that the future of Bitcoin or digital currency from a broader perspective is really about machine-to-machine payments. So by the time you have an unmanned taxi driving you around New York and then going to power up at an unmanned power station or going to get repairs at an unmanned auto shop, you'll see the machine-to-machine payments done with some sort of digital currency.